Good morning, everybody. So this morning, my children, fourth graders, second grader kids, asked me what am I going to do today at work. They ask me that a lot. Usually the answer is a little bit vague and deceptive because you want to say, well, today we're going to do another gang homicide. We're going to work with the San Jose PD. We're going to go get these guys. But today, I was very pleased when they asked me that question. I said to them, today I get to speak with a number of professionals, and they asked about you, and I said, well, these professionals, they're experts in homes. Anything you need to be done at home, these folks would know what to do. So my son was kind of quiet, and I said, well, does that make sense to you? He said, it doesn't make sense to me. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, Mommy always told us that, he said, what do you have to say to these people? Because Mommy always told us that your daddy is absolutely useless around the house. So that was very humbling. And so if I'm a little bit nervous speaking to you, there's a reason, because I'm pretty much useless around the house. And I know you folks are the experts. My name is Scott Cui. I work for the DA's office, and I oversee the white-collar crimes unit, and a portion of that unit, we work very closely with some of the state agencies, such as the Department of Insurance, EDD, who I know is present today, CSLB, DIR, and also our South Bay Labor Council, which we meet regularly to discuss things about compliance. And very happy to be here today to speak a little bit about what the DA's office does. And I was telling the presenters here that I'm not going to take too much of your time. I'll just briefly explain the DA's office roles. Generally speaking, a lot of people don't know what DA's offices do, so I'll kind of give a quick rundown. Sometimes I go to a party and people say, hey, what do you do? I say, oh, I work for the DA's office. They say, yeah, how do you like representing child molesters? Like, well, no, first of all, that's not what I do. We usually prosecute folks who are accused of a crime. And secondly, somebody's got to represent, folks who are accused. So it's like when you guys are going out and people ask you what you do, and you tell them what you do, they'll go, let's say you install air conditioning. So, oh yeah, you do water heaters, right? And I'm like, no, okay. Well, secondly, don't you just put some screws in that thing? And so, no. But we don't get upset. We just kind of go, we understand. The general public may not understand what we all do, but it's okay. This is a good event for me to talk about that. So the DA's office usually is like I would call it like the second step of law enforcement, which is the first step is the police, and also investigators that usually have badges and guns, and they can go hands-on and use of force. The DA's office usually, or also the enforcement agencies. Law enforcement agencies are the front-end folks can give citations and things like that. Now, the DA's office is usually the second step. So once, I say I go to the Great Mall today, and they drop me off, and I'm done with my shopping. I'm gonna go home, and so I have no ride. I'm gonna steal one of those cars in the parking lot and go home. So I steal one of the cars. Milpitas PD pulls me over. They arrest me. Okay, they say, hey, Scott, you stole the car, okay, we're gonna arrest you for auto theft. I said, okay. And now the police, they don't make the charging decision. Basically, the police is telling me, hey, based on what I've seen you've done, you've committed a crime. I'm gonna go talk to a different entity about charging you with a crime, okay? And that entity is gonna officially charge you with a crime. And that entity usually is the DA's office. Okay, so the police would then generate a report, says, hey, we saw Scott driving on whatever road, and he drove a stolen car. This is our evidence to show that he drove a stolen car. And the DA's office would say, look at the reports and go, yeah, it looks like we can prove this. We're gonna file charges in court. So that's usually what the DA's office does. And very much like, when we get like a parking ticket, most of the people that get either cited or they get pulled over, they committed a more serious crime, they, for a lot of them, they ended up saying, look, okay, I did it, and what's my punishment? What can I do to mitigate, the fine or whatever it is, jail time? So they ended up either pay the fine, pleading to something. So the process will end there. Just like when I get a parking ticket, I guess I did park in the red zone, whatever it is. I go pay it, I'm done. Same thing with other criminal cases. But the ones where the person who's accused feels like, hey, look, I didn't do this. I think I was falsely accused, or I don't think you can prove this, okay, despite what you said that you saw. And then those things get contested, and this is why we have lawyers to litigate these cases, and end up going to jury trial and things to that effect. So that's generally what the DA's office does. Now, when it comes to working with our partners in the state and local agencies regarding things that are somewhat related to your area, the one thing I know our presenters here are going to talk about that today, which is maintaining workers' compensation insurance, and having licenses for CSLB purposes. Obviously, for all of you here, I'm assuming you all have your contractor licenses. That's why you're here. And why the reason we do that, and you might have heard this 1,000 times, so forgive me if I say it again. We are the one of the most important things. We live in this community. We want the playing field to be fair for all the folks that are playing by the rules, because that's how we succeed as a group of folks. So a lot of times what we're trying to do in these areas is trying to gain compliance from folks who are not complying, and to make sure to bring them up to your level of playing. So it's fair competition rather than, hey, why as a contractor, why would I want to do business here if everybody's cheating here? I'm the only person who's playing by the rules. Forget that. I'm going somewhere where law enforcement actually is doing their jobs. So we're trying to achieve that by working with our local and state partners, and same with workers' compensation insurance. We do a lot of work in that area, and we visit folks who are doing work, not just in your industry, but in restaurants, supermarkets, and other industries to make sure that people are aware of the importance of getting workers' comp, make sure our workers are protected. So that is my brief opening. I try to keep it brief because I know that there's some substantive stuff that need to be talked about today. I'll answer any questions you want, but other than that, I'll turn it over to Dave. Okay, thanks.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dave Diaz with the Sheet Metal Workers, Local 104, which this is our training center. Welcome here. This is, I hope you guys all agree, this is a great training facility. Miguel Cabrera, sorry, Ibrera. He's the training coordinator here. He does a great job. You guys can see how clean this facility is, how great the students are trained and everything else. At the end of all this, I would want to know if any of you guys want to tour Miguel and Willie Solis over there in that other corner. I don't know why they're in the corners, but they're both in blue. They'll do a tour for you through here if anybody's interested in seeing this facility. It's a great facility. We do a lot of different aspects of the HVAC industry and sheet metal industry in general. But on behalf of the Contractor State License Board, welcome. This is the first CSLB HVAC conference that we've ever done. I'm vice chair of the board currently, and go from there. The CSLB has made providing information to the construction industry and I got to put these on, I can't see. And exploring opportunities for licensed contractors had a competitive advantage over unlicensed contractors, a top priority. The underground economy, everybody knows that. It's the governor's, I guess what do you want to call it, pet peeve or something, but there's a ton of that out there, and we want to kind of combat that. In my experience as a business representative for Sheet Metal Workers Local 104, I can attest that commercial and public work HVAC installations are typically performed with required permit. Not so much on the residential side. There's studies out there that back in 2008 that showed that on the residential side, 200 to 70,000 to 300,000 units come into California or are installed in California a year. about 10% get permitted. Not a very good ratio there. So there's an issue. Okay, that's one of the reasons why we're here. So I'm very excited with today's lineup of presenters. First, you'll learn from the California Energy Commission mechanical engineer, Tab Cummings, who's standing over there, about energy efficiency requirements that take effect in Santa Clara County here July 1st. It's important to be familiar with these energy requirements and learn the new strategies and how to use them to your advantage and to generate increased business. So that's what Tab's going to talk about. And I think, what, you got about an hour and a half? 2 hours. 2 hours, okay. Just kidding. Next, you'll receive information from Mike Bashand. Is that how you say it? Was that close? Yeah, okay. And he's sitting over there. He's a HERS provider about contractors and building departments that can work with HERS raters. And after our break, I don't see her here yet, but Nancy Springer, she's also on the board with me, and president of the County Building Officials Association, will give the building department's perspective. But like I said, I don't see her here yet. So, and then after that, CSLB Chief of Enforcement, Dave Fote, who does an amazing job. I've been on the board since 2011. And Dave and the staff, Scott, they just kick butt. I mean, they really do a good job and go after, you'd be actually, I was really surprised when I got on the board how, not just in the HVAC industry, but with the underground economy, how some contractors will just go target the elderly and all that, and they really, really go after them good and do a great job with that. And yeah, he'll share you information on the CSLB enforcement efforts and a new ambassador program.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, first up is our speaker is Tav Cummings from the California Energy Commission, talking about the new energy efficiency standards, especially here in Santa Clara County. Yeah.
So do I have till 10:30? Is that correct?
Yeah, as long as they're willing to listen to you.
Well, so, no, 10 o'clock. I've been asked to give a brief overview of the changes for 2013 for HVAC. I actually gave, last night, I talked to about 100 HVAC contractors and technicians at a supply house. Presentation went about an hour and a half with all the questions, so this is going to be a very, very high-level overview. But the main thing to remember, the biggest change is that starting July 1st, anytime you do a changeout, and there's exceptions and there's other requirements as well, but the main thing that I want you to go away with is if you do a changeout, then you have to do duct sealing and duct pressurization. So the installer needs to test his work, make sure that the ducts don't leak, and then you need to have a HERS rater come in and verify that those jobs. And Mike will be talking about working with a HERS rater. I wanted to go over first some of the things that are in the handout. So as mentioned, I didn't want to put the whole presentation in here. It would just taken up too much information. Just background information of when the new code goes into effect. Sorry, let me show you. This is what we're looking for here. Just background information about when the code goes into effect. Some of the documents that are available on our website with the website link. The next page. So anytime you've got a question between 8 and 12 and 1 to 4:30, we've got our energy hotline. They are often waiting for calls to come in, or sometimes waiting for calls to come in, just depending on our staffing level. But I mean, they're there to answer any questions that you might have. Yes.
What about an air conditioning changeout? Is that required?
Yes. If whether it's heating only, air conditioning only, heating and air conditioning, if it's hooked to ducts, you have to do duct sealing.
Well, when you say hooked to ducts, a condenser's not connected to ductwork. That's what I'm asking. If it's just a split system condenser changeout.
Does it have ducts?
Connected to the furnace, it does.
Okay, yes, you have to do duct pressurization.
Okay.
So we'll go over the exact requirements in just a moment. So we've also got links for just all the additional links that are on our website. Here's the climate zone map. So there's 16 different climate zones. There are different requirements in the different climate zones. This is Zone 4 requirements, kind of an overview of those different requirements. And then this document right here is the CF1R. This actually lists all of the very specific requirements, the different work that's required. So this is what would be turned in when you apply for your permit. You check the box, the different work, the work that you're going to be doing, and it kind of gets the building department, the inspector, and the contractor on the same page of what work is going to be done and what HERS tests are required. So this is the basic steps for dealing with the HERS raters having to do the HERS tests. First, determine what climate zone that you're in. Next, you fill out the appropriate CF1R. So we've got the Alt 3 and the Alt 4, which list the different requirements by climate zone. So then you apply for your permit, turn in the CF1R. The installer fills out their typical change-out work, and then the installer would then do all the required tests for the CF1R, and then the installer gives those documents stating that he's done the different tests to a HERS rater, and then the HERS rater comes out and verifies. Again, Mike's going to be talking more about the HERS rater, but when a HERS rater comes out, he can test every single job, or he can do on a sample basis. And again, Mike's going to go into that a little bit more in depth. And then when you're ready, once all of the HERS testing is completed, just need to make sure that a registered CF1R, CF2R, and CF3R are on site. So again, the 1R is the document that you've turned in that explains all the work that's being done. The 2R is the document that the installer fills out saying, I've done my duct test, I've done if the refrigerant charge test is required, if airflow testing is required. And then the 3Rs is just certifying that the HERS rater passed those, that everything was done properly. So the registered 1R, 2R, and 3R need to be on site. So as I'd shown earlier, there's two different CF1Rs for HVAC alterations. There's a 3 and a 4. You can go, listed in the handout is a more detailed map. It's also listed by by zip code. So you can figure out exactly what climate zone that the work that you're doing is in. The main difference between the climate zones, you got 1, 3 to 7, and 16. Those are cooler climate zones, and those don't require refrigerant charge testing. In the warmer climate zones, 2, 8 through 15, those are warmer climate zones, and in those climate zones, you have to do refrigerant charge testing. That's the main difference between the two forms. So as I mentioned earlier, if you do a furnace changeout, it used to require that you had to do refrigerant charge testing. So many parts of the state, they've been dealing with these HERS requirements for quite a long time. And it used to require that they do in the hot climate zones that they had to do a refrigerant charge test when they did a furnace changeout. And again, that's no longer required. It's when you, in the hot climate zones, when you break into the refrigerant line, when you replace a compressor or a coil or a condenser, then you have to do a HERS verified refrigerant test. So in our code, we have the very specific requirements on how a refrigerant test needs to be completed. It's step by step. It's listed down there. No more beer can cold. Got to do the specific testing requirements. So as I'd mentioned, there's mandatory duct sealing throughout all of California when you do a furnace changeout. Another big change is throughout California, all replaced ducts need to be all new ducts. If the ducts are already there and you haven't touched them, you don't need to worry about it. But all new ducts that you've installed need to have an R6, as well as new plenums need to be R6. Yes?
If you seal existing ductwork, you then have to insulate it to R6?
No. So the question was, if you seal existing ductwork, do you need to seal it to R, or put additional insulation on there? And no, you don't need to. And then in the very hot climate zones, so in Palm Springs, and also where it's really cold, up in the Sierras, which is climate zone 16, that requires R8 ductwork. So the actual requirements, so when you do a change out, when you replace just the furnace, you replace just the condenser, you replace just the coil, or adding 40 feet, these all require sealing of the ductwork and pressurization of the duct system to ensure that it leaks less than 15%. The other option is the 10% to the outside, or in some places, as you're well aware, they've got the returns that are using cavities like they did in the past, and it's leaking like crazy. Or if they've got all of the ductwork in between the conditioned space, or between the first and second floor, and it's not reachable, what you do is you smoke it. You use your duct blaster, and you introduce smoke into the duct blaster, and then any place that there's a leak, it needs to be sealed if it's accessible. So the definition of accessible is that we don't want you to do any demolition. Accessible means that that you can move something or take a panel off. That is accessible. So no demolitions required, but if something needs to be moved, then it's considered accessible. So those are new requirements. I know it's a big change for some areas that have never had to deal with the HERS testing. But so again, that's the change out furnace, condenser, coil, or adding 40 feet. So there are some exceptions. And actually, why don't we just look at that? Well, I've got, let's see if one are here. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Sorry. So as you can see in this document, the option 1 is where all of so that would be a complete change out, condenser, evaporator, compressor. Then you've got to do the duct sealing, but there are the exceptions here. So if it's been registered with the HERS rater before, so if it's a newer system, it can be very difficult to find out this information, and basically the homeowner would need to have a copy on hand Or the other option is that if most of the ductwork is in conditioned space, you don't have to do any duct sealing. But most of the time it's option 3. You know, you've got older homes where there's asbestos that's there, then you don't need to do the duct pressurization. So there are exceptions. Yes.
I just like to say something. This is all very good information, but you know how much space is in a crawl space? It's only 18 inches. No, there's nothing there. How can you? You have to hire some laborers to dig the ground and to make the sufficient working area to work on a crawl space. I think this is very good, but I think that the code should be changed maybe to a new construction type, not to older homes.
So it is also required in new construction. It's a mandatory measure. So anytime you install, so starting July 1st, any new HVAC system that's installed with ducts, will be required to be duct pressurized and it actually needs to leak 6% or less. So it'll be allowed to leak a lot less, and it is going to be a mandatory measure, meaning that it's going to have to be done. So again, if they're not accessible, if there is no room there, then you're not required to go in and do the duct testing. But again, that actually would kind of be up to the HERS rater to decide whether it would be required to squeeze in there or not. But yeah, I fully agree that sometimes you've got ducts that are in the crawl space that they're just, they're okay. There's 1.5 feet. Well, that's not really reasonable to, maybe my 8-year-old can get in there and seal it, but probably not going to be hiring him to do that. So there is that, again, that exception of the accessible.
Eric Emblem with the Joint Committee on Energy and Environmental Policy. Isn't it important to have that the ducts be tested and that the homeowner make the final decision?
Well, I mean, the homeowner, they're going to want tight ducts, but again, we have the alternative in there or the out that if they're not accessible, that, as a contractor, you're just going to have to just say that they're not accessible. There are other alternatives out there to sealing ducts where they blow a sealant in there. And what it does is it as it goes through, it starts building up on where all the leaks are, and will seal the gaps. So that is an alternative, but that is not required under our code at this time. So again, it's whether it's accessible, and if it's not accessible, it's not required to be sealed.
But I think my point is, Tav, is that it's the homeowner that's having the measure done, and they're paying the bill. And if it's inaccessible, it's inaccessible, and they would be aware of that. But I think they also should be aware that there are other alternatives, and that, leaky ducts is lost energy.
So right, so as a contractor, you'd want to make sure that, you do your duct test and you're finding that 50% of you've got 50% leakage. You should let the homeowner know that if there's a lot of leakage here, I'm not required, I don't have to seal it, but I recommend that we do some demolition and maybe put in a hard return because it's pulling air from the garage. So, that's an option that should be made available to the homeowner to let them know that that's there and that they can most likely save a bunch of energy by not pulling in, 140-degree attic air. So that's an option that should be made available to the building department or the homeowner. Let's see. So as I'd mentioned, okay.
Thank you. How is the code dealing with ductless system, for that matter?
So with ductless systems, there's only a requirement to do refrigerant charge test. That's the only requirement. So as I'd mentioned, all new duct systems, whether it's in existing buildings or in newly constructed buildings, if you install a new duct system, it needs to be not leak more than 6%. And at the bottom there's the note of what a new duct system is. So when you install a new duct system, if it's hooked to an air conditioning system, then you also need to verify. So again, you need to verify that the duct leakage, or how much it's leaking, but also you need to verify airflow and fan watt draw. So we've got a requirement that it move a minimum of 350 CFM per ton, and that there's a watt draw test that's done. So if you're moving at 350 CFM per ton, it's more than likely that you will be meeting the 0.58 watts per CFM requirement as well. But there is an alternative, and I will. It's actually in your handout. It is quite shocking for most building contractors. Why don't we just go to that? It's a table. So if you install a new duct system, again you need to do fan watt draw and airflow. But the alternative is you just follow the duct sizing requirements in the table. And that is, so if you have one return, the largest tonnage you can put on and have only single return is 2.5 tons. And you need to have a minimum duct of 20 inch for 2.5 ton. And then the filter grill needs to be 800 inches. So that's so my brother's an HVAC contractor. My uncle's an HVAC contractor. My family are in the trades a lot. And when I first told my brother about that, he was, well, I've been telling him for a long time about all the benefits of more returns. Many studies have shown that the reason why there's not proper airflow is because the returns are so small. So that's why we had some tests that were done, and they came up with this this alternative. So if you want to put in 2 returns.
Page in the book here somewhere?
So it is in your handout.
Thank
Yes. Yes, towards the beginning. So if you want to put in 2 returns, then here's the requirement on the next page. And so again, if you put in 3 tons and larger, you have to put in 2 returns, and with quite a large filter grill. But again, if you don't want to follow these, then you can just test your airflow and ensure that it does meet the 350 CFM. Did you still have a question?
I was just going to say, in a lot of cases, the return plenum itself is smaller than 20 inch.
Right.
That's not even large enough.
Right. So what's going to happen is well, if a second return is going to have to be installed.
But it's going to narrow down to the plenum no matter what.
Right, but you'll have to put plenum box on.
So you have to put a transition with a larger plenum.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So let me go back up. So as I mentioned, in the hotter climate zones, you also need to do a refrigerant charge test. So 2 and 8 through 15, anytime you break into the line, the refrigerant line, so whether it's a compressor, TXV, coil, condenser, you're required to do a refrigerant charge test. And again, in our code, like I said, we've got very specific requirements on how to do the tests. So it required for both, for newly constructed buildings. So in newly constructed buildings, usually a computer program is used, and they model the building, and they're able to model different things. For example, let's say they don't want to do refrigerant charge tests, so they put in a higher efficient unit or better windows. But for existing buildings, refrigerant charge test is required in those hotter climate zones. And as I'd mentioned earlier, for mini splits, the weigh-in method is required. So bypass ducts for new duct systems, for new HV systems, they're no longer allowed unless it's modeled with a computer program. It's because just studies showed that they waste a lot of energy. Just circling refrigerated air around and around and around waste a lot of energy. So that's not allowed, again, unless it's modeled on a computer program. There's more requirements for zonal control. So if you've got a single system with dampers, then each zone has to move the 350 CFM per zone. And they're not allowed to do that table, the alternative table. So you actually need to test the actual airflow into each zone. So this deals with new construction. If on the computer program, I'd mentioned they wanted to install more efficient air conditioning system and get credit for that by putting in less insulation or less efficient windows, they can take credit for EER and SEER. The reason why I bring this up is because with the new code, you're going to have to go to AHRI, and you're going to have to know the coil and the condenser that you're putting in, and AHRI will tell you the exact efficiency for EER and SEER, and if it doesn't meet the requirements listed on the CF1R for that building, you're going to have to put in a different coil or different condenser so that the system together comes out as the EER that's required, and that's HERS rated, HERS verified. So basically, the installer is saying, this is the coil I installed, this is the condenser I installed. This is the AHRI number, and then the HERS rater is verifying that those things were in fact installed and that it meets the requirements on the CF1R. So that's pretty big change as well. So I just wanted to again, this is for new construction, and only if it's listed on the CF1R. New construction. And actually, you guys didn't ask a lot of questions, but you're in shock. So, again, many other areas throughout California have been dealing with these exact same requirements for a long time. From talking to contractors, it usually takes about 2 man-hours to seal your average duct system. So it's usually not too bad, but it can take a lot longer. It can take a lot less time. Yes?
Good morning, Tav. What do you do with the duct testing when you have an outside air duct?
What do you do when you have an outside air duct? You seal it, and permanently. They're not allowed. No, they're not allowed. So we're talking about residential right now. So we're talking about residential. So commercial. So we've got a few minutes. I'll talk about commercial. So duct testing is the only HERS test that goes over to commercial, but it's only to small commercial where the unit itself conditions 5,000 square feet or less. So I'm not sure how many tons that usually is. So if the unit conditions 5,000 square foot or less, and 25% or more of the ducts are non-conditioned space, you're supposed to be pressurizing the duct system, and you can tape off that outside air in that circumstance. And then you would pressurize the duct system and seal the leaks.
Hey, Tab, it's Nancy. Hey, the new forms, are they, my understanding is they're all available online now, and are they fillable type forms, or these can be easily downloaded? Are they able to just go in there, or do they have to go through a HERS rater to get the proper forms, or is there a distinction between the two?
So we've got all the forms online on our website. If you go to our 2013 Title 24 website, it'll say non-residential manual. You click on the non-residential manual, and it will, towards the bottom, it will say compliance forms. You click on that. It is a single PDF, but actually all of the HERS forms, they cannot be hand filled out. They have to be done. All of the information needs to be uploaded to a website, uploaded to a HERS website. And they have to be registered with on the website, and they're not allowed to be filled out or filled out any other way. But so actually, so go up to efficiency. Click on the 2013 code. Where is that? Let me just... So 2013 building standards. We'll go down to residential compliance manual. So we've got a chapter just on HVAC, and then below that is compliance forms. Well, the reason why it's 600 pages is, well, every single form has a declaration statement on it, which takes up more than half of a page. So so we could have a page document that would take up less than a page, but you add that declaration statement on there, and now it's 2 pages long. Yes.
It's my understanding now if you have a hood and a kitchen hood that's pumping out 1,000 CFM, you have to bring outside air back in. That's required in Palo Alto.
So we do have requirements. So that's a non-residential question. So there are new requirements.
Residential. Yeah, but you're bringing outside air in, so doesn't that mess up your whole efficiency? If I'm exhausting 1,000 CFM out of a hood, I have to have a mechanical system that allows air back into the house. That's unconditioned in winter or summer. That's required in Palo Alto.
So if you're bringing, so you've got this your building, it's more or less sealed. If you're pulling out 1,000 CFM, it's always going to be bringing in 1,000 CFM. So that's not required by my code.
It's required for California, UMC. Palo Alto.
So I'm going to have to look into that a little bit.
Requiring on every single kitchen.
So it's not required by Title 24 Part 6, but I will. Okay. So I'm gonna have to. I can make myself a note and.
Well, my reason why I bring it up is you're bringing outside air in the middle of winter. It's 40 degrees.
Right.
And if you're moving 1,000 CFM or bigger, this whole thing is moot.
Right. Well, again, whether you're bringing it in mechanically or you're bringing it in throughout the building shell through leaks, if you're pumping out 1,000 CFM, 1,000 CFM is coming in.
Unconditioned.
Right, but it's always been doing that. Now they're requiring you to bring it in mechanically.
Yes. Okay.
That's the difference. It used to just come in through the leaks in the shell.
Right.
Now they're requiring additional cost and additional to bring it in mechanically. But I'll
Okay.
make a note of that. And
I have a question about duct testing in commercial applications. Is it being treated differently for downstream of the VAV boxes and the zones because that's the low pressure side?
so it's only for constant volume systems. So VAV systems don't require duct testing. So in commercial buildings, it's only constant zone or constant volume. Thank you, constant volume, and when it conditions 5,000 square foot or less, where that unit conditions 5,000 square foot or less. So it's really residential type systems that we're trying to reach right now. I mean, probably in the future, I'm sure we will be going to sealing of testing of larger duct systems, but right now it's just the smaller residential type systems. And there's a question over here.
Is it required to have a load calculations in residential?
So there's always, the question is load calculations. Load calculations are required in res as well as non-res. I believe that the code says that when it's a new system is installed is when you're supposed to be doing load calc. I would have to look at the specifics.
I have a question here. Just the bottom line is when we're trying to sell an equipment to a customer, how much more cost is going to be to the consumer to have all these tests in addition to the building permits and inspections? Because the bottom line is very difficult to sell more cost.
Right. So that is a very important question. It definitely costs more in general to pull a permit because you've got to deal with the inspector.
I mean, that's already, you get the permit, that's not a problem. But how much more for the testing, or who's going to do the final inspection? Is the inspector going to do the testing and check for that you have the leak seal? Who's doing that?
Okay, so in the bid needs to be included the work that needs to be done. So you might have to do a little bit more investigation. So I mean, it is going to cost additional money to seal the ductwork. So and it's going to cost additional money to have a third-party HERS rater involved as well. So you know, if you're so usually they, and actually Mike can talk about this a little bit more. Usually what occurs is, you know, you interview a couple of different HERS raters, you get their pricing structure. That way you have an understanding of how much it's going to cost to get a HERS rater involved. And then I think what's usually done is most contractors kind of just average out, you know, they'll spend a little bit of time figuring out how bad are the ducts, and then they, you know, some jobs they'll not have to spend as much time fixing the ducts, and others they'll have to eat the additional costs. So I'm not sure exactly how the bidding has to go, and Dave can or when you write a bid up, how that has to work into there. So maybe Dave can touch that a little bit. How much leeway there is after you've submitted the bid and they've accepted it. How much leeway you have to make changes for work that's found after that.
In a situation where the homeowner says, you know, I'm doing all the permit because I got additional other work, how's that fall into place?
So the question was if the homeowner's pulling all the permits. I think Dave might be able to talk about this a little bit, but usually, officially, unless the homeowner is actually doing the work, I believe it's against the law for the homeowner to actually pull the permit. I believe it's required that if a licensed contractor is doing the work, that but I don't know the exact requirements of that, and maybe we talk about that a little bit. And we've got a question right over here first, and then.
All this additional cost, don't you think people would be pushed to go with the non-licensed contractors now?
That's why the CSLB is here. And that's, I mean, they do quite a few stings to find licensed contractors, and I know that he will be discussing that. And we've got another question, this gentleman with the hat right
It
here.
was along the same lines as
Okay.
his. There's awful lot of homeowner general contractors out there. And they're the ones responsible for it, and how do we make sure that they do their job? Who's gonna police them?
Yeah.
Actually, if you own your own house, you can represent yourself as a contractor, right? That's what I heard. You
Right.
can be your own general for your own house.
My understanding is if you are doing all of the work, yes, you can pull a permit and you can build your own house from the ground up. But I think Dave can talk about it a little bit more. So I am actually out of time. Oh, we are going to do one more, but I will be here. I mean, I'm more than happy to talk to you during the break. And
So my experience with HERS testing is that it's not just a show up, test, and leave. So basically what they have to do is they have to pull information, they go away, kind of like engineers, process, and then certify. So, typically, you do a job, you want to get paid, and you usually get paid upon permit completion. But is there requirements for these HERS testers? Is there additional pressure for HERS testers to turn around that testing process quickly?
So Mike can talk about that, but really their incentive is to let them know that you're not going to hire them next time if they don't get it done quickly. They can, I know that they're in the process of working, there are some HERS raters that have all of the equipment with them so that they can go out to the job site as long as the installing contractor did everything correctly, all of the tests pass, they can enter the data right there, they can print out the documents right there, and they can leave the documents on site right then. So everything can be done all at one time. So there's no waiting whatsoever. So there are HERS raters out there that, they've got their laptop with data plan, and they've got their printer right there, and they can do it all right then. So I think we need to move on, but I'm happy to answer questions later. Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, thanks very much, Tav. And actually, it's a really good segue. We're going to go ahead and bring Michael Bouchard up to speak, where the rubber meets the road, talking about specifically the HERS.
I usually don't like to follow Tav in the speaker because there's usually rotten tomatoes and eggs and old bananas laying up here. So just kidding, Tav. I want to answer some of those questions you guys have been talking about. Remember that in the rest of the state, this business model has been established for several years. So I'm going to give you some hints about that, some ideas to talk to your colleagues about. Maybe you've got friends or other people who work in other climate zones that are kind of used to this. So the first thing that's up here, just so you know how to find a rater, this is our particular website. Other providers have the same thing. There's a rater directory there. They're required by regulation to have a public access point for people like you to find a rater. There's all kinds of ways to search by county, by zip code, by company name, so that you can find people to give you bids and do your searches that way. Some of you, are there any contractors that work in more than one climate zone here, maybe? Not sure necessarily? Okay, so if you're crossing climate zones and things, some of your things are going to change. We'll talk a little bit about that too. So go ahead and bring up my PowerPoint. Thank you. There was some talk a few moments ago about the consumer. Eric Emblem raised a question about that. Sorry.
So I'm going to let you just hold this. It might be easier.
Okie dokie. Yeah, there's no standing still when I talk. So this is about the consumer ultimately. You know that as well as the rest of the people in the room here. This is, you're serving them. You want them to have the best job possible with the most comfort available for their dollar. So this is about three people getting the consumer the best possible performance. We talk a lot in the business about quality, but can you define for me what quality means? Well, it means a good-looking system. It means the right product. It means a lot of vague things. It's a kind of a descriptive process, and you market with that. But there's not any real define standards that a consumer or other person can hang their hat on and say, oh, that's a quality job, because quality can be a relative kind of thing. But on the performance, if what you're shooting for is performance, which is what the standards shoot for, then you can quantify that. You can say, I've got my 350 CFM per ton going across the coil or whatever. It's been tested and verified by a third party, somebody who's not me, the contractor. I don't have a bias in this. I'm a contractor and I'm doing my job. The building department's doing their job, and the HERS rater is checking on the efficiency part of it. And we'll talk about why there's two different inspectors. I believe that marketing performance is a much better market. I'm not a contractor, and I don't sell to people all day long, so that's up to you, but that's my thoughts. The building department inspects for health and safety, mechanical codes, make sure that the HERS rater did do a job somehow on the job, and then the building department's third party. They don't work for you, they don't work for the HERS rater, they work for the jurisdiction and on behalf of the consumer. A HERS rater is defined in the codes as a special inspector under Title 24, Part 6. They do the efficiency measuring. They do the things that the building inspectors don't have time to do or don't have the inclination or the training to do. So a HERS rater is really looking at energy efficiency. He's also providing data to the homeowner, to the building department, to the MLS if they want to score, a HERS score. This is a different subject. But there's a lot of people who want to know what's happened on these jobs, especially the Energy Commission and the California Public Utility Commission. They do rebate programs based on information that they gather from providers and other people to know where's the best place to put incentive dollars to get good performing systems installed in the state of California. And again, a HERS rater cannot work for you by W-2 or by other things. It's a contract between you and a third party, and they have to stay independent. So they do two things. They field verify, and they also do diagnostic testing. Tav showed you a picture of the AHRI SEER and EER documentation from the AHRI website. That's verification. The HERS rater looks at a serial number or a model number or whatever on the equipment and verifies through a process that that's correct. Verification is also looking to see if insulation has been put in correctly and so forth. Diagnostic equipment means they have to hook up actual equipment that measures pressures and flows and gives results that have to meet the parameters that are set by the standards. So how do you know which HERS tests? Some of you who work in other jurisdictions and in other climate zones may need to know, oh, I'm in a different climate zone, this is going to be different things. The climate zone and the work scope determine the HERS tests that are going to be needed, but there's good news. The websites and the forms, that 611 pages of forms that you have, they are programmed into the provider registries in such a way that once you enter the address and the name of the job, the type of job you're doing, it generates the proper information for you. You don't have to know all of that. You don't have to dig through those books of forms that you download. I recommend that if you download the forms from the website, you just look at them for familiarity and kind of see what you're going to be needing to do, because you're not going to be able to use them directly. They will be used online in real time, entered on the registries. I gave you this stuff just to quickly show you a couple of ways to find out where you are in the world if you need to do that. I'm going to just kind of skim through this quickly because it's in your books, but there's several places to download. The arrow shows you where to download a climate zone map. Excuse me, I went the wrong way. That overlays Google Earth, and that's a pretty cool deal. If you're along a borderline somewhere, I suggest talking directly to the jurisdiction to make sure which climate zone they say that they're in, but you can go there, and where that blue arrow is, once you download something, this comes into Google Earth, then you check that as an overlay, And then you can just blow up the city wherever you want to go or county that you're in and find out where you are. That will help you. Okay, what's a provider registry? Excuse me. A registry is a component of what a HERS provider does. We do three things. We train HERS providers. We register all of their documentation. It's your documentation too. And we do a quality assurance tests on them. We go out and measure 1% of the jobs that they did on you guys, we do on them, so that we can make sure that they're doing their jobs properly and within boundaries of comparing correctly to what the contractor did. So there's lots of issues about that. We do other things. There's ethics issues that we look into on HERS raters. If they're a little bit too close to their contractor, kind of buddying up and fudging numbers a little bit, we're interested in that kind of information. We are expected to enforce these things by the Energy Commission, which we do. Look into the HERS raters. And we also want to know, make sure that there's no conflicts of interest. Is the rater own the job? That is it his house that he's doing his own rating on, or is he working for a subdivision, a builder in a subdivision, or something like that? Are there any people here who are who do subdivision work? Okay, that's a different topic altogether. Okay, so the registry requirements, they know what you're doing because you've typed in, well, I'm doing an alteration, or I'm doing a new construction, or it's non-residential. Then it lays out the proper forms for you to know what to do. All registries do this, they don't do it the same way, but they have to meet the same CEC requirements. We're regulated very heavily by Commission, and they look in to make sure that our registries are working properly. There's a lot of people looking at this information, and you might be looking at it too, because you have a record in our registry of all the jobs you've ever done and what was done and what equipment went in there. So you can mine your own data if you want to. The jurisdiction, City of San Jose, they can see all jobs done in City of San Jose, but they can't see any done in City of Sacramento or County of Kings County or nowhere else, just their own jurisdiction. They can search and look and do all kinds of information for them. The HERS rater, of course, he needs to know where things are because he's doing the HERS ratings and entering most of the data. In fact, a HERS rater can enter all of this data for you if you wish. And there are business models out there that do that. The CEC looks at the data. We're required by regulation to give them data when they need it. They look at the QA results that we do when we check on our own HERS raters. So they're making sure that we're keeping up and doing that properly. The independent-owned utilities, PG&E in this area, they do rebate programs and they want to know what's going on. So if they've paid money, they can see those jobs. Same with Energy Star, solar homes, and lots of other programs. There might be some pilots out there trying to enhance the number of permits that are being pulled by looking at data, some data from the registries and other locations to combine information and get that 10% number up where it's a much better operating field for the guys who play the game correctly. We're very concerned with that, and we spend a lot of time working on that. Tav kind of went over things, and I'm going to remind you that here it's new, but I'm going to try to kind of explain the way it's commonly done. It took about 1.5 to 2 years for the rest of the world to settle this out. This started in 2005 for the hot climate zones. So it does vary a little bit by jurisdiction how you pull a permit. There's people working on online permit pulling, automatic permit pulling, batch permit pulling. All kinds of permit pulling processes are trying to be brought up to another level to make it more convenient and more timely to get a permit pulled. The CF1R is required for a permit. So if there's a building department and you go in to get a permit, they say, well, what's your CF1R number? They want to know that the job has been entered into the registry at the starting point. Remember, this is the document that says, okay, I'm a contractor. I'm going to do this job at this address on this climate zone and some other information. Okay. So the building permit number goes on there. Then the contractor or rater you don't print one out and mail it to somebody. The contractor logs in and he can see it, or the rater logs in and he can see it right on the website in real time. So they can, if you want to know what's going on, you say, okay, this is the job I'm going to go do. And it's got a certain coil attached to it. Okay, so you get out there and you install your job, but you find out when you get there or on the way out the shop in the morning, you don't have that coil, you got a different coil, and you can't get the other one. That's okay. You can change your work right there online. You just type in the different, you don't have to do it then, but when it's appropriate, you type in online into the next document, the CF2R, here's what I actually did. Now it'll change what the CF1R says and so forth, and that's okay. The registry does all this stuff automatically. You don't have to delete and unload and do all that stuff. You guys have to, somebody has to fill out for the contractor a CF2R on every job. And I emphasize that because you don't have to test, you have to test every job, but your HERS rater doesn't. This is where some of the economics of the business model that the Energy Commission, they didn't develop the business model, but they developed regulations that allow business models to be developed, allows a HERS rater to sample 1 out of every 7 of the jobs that you, up to 1 out of every 7 of the jobs that you do. So if you're doing 20 or 30 of these a week, your HERS rater might have to go out and check 3 or 4 or whatever the number is. The rest of them go into a sample group, but you guys, the contractors, have to test every one. So your test data will be in the registry, and the HERS rater's data will be in there on the house that he tested. But on the house, or she, there's lots of female HERS raters, the house that the rater tested gets data. All the other sampled ones just get included and say, okay, if you did this one good, you probably did those good, they're all good. So you don't have to have 7 trips by the rater out to 7 jobs. Some raters can do that fairly economically, and so you have to seek your own business model and so forth. But that's the way the basic process works for the HERS rater. You don't want to hire this person. You want to contract with 2 or 3, and they'll give you pricing. Again, I don't have information from your climate zone because this is new for all of us. On a really, really high volume basis, you might be talking a little over $100, $125, plus the certificate fees. We have to charge for the data that we capture so that we can manipulate that data and write the programming to collect the data. So those fees, his time and labor and gas and whatever he does, plus some registry fees, that's what the costs are. It can go to $250 or $300 on some jobs, if depending on location and distance and all kinds of things. Same things that you guys do. You're really based on time, and so is a rater. It's going to take him a certain amount of time to do a test. It's going to take him a certain amount of time to get there, and he's going to do a certain amount of time entering data into the registries. So that's all what's going to add up into his fee. So the contractor or the rater can enter that. Now, if you're a contractor, you're liable for the job. The rater can fill in the data for you, but he's going to put your signature on the liability statement. So this is one of the things, I didn't get it in here. I wanted to get a signature block of a form. Pull up a form, a CF2R form for ducts. When you download your 611 pages or whatever you do, you can look on other areas to find it. When you look at that signature thing, you see who did the job, and you also says who entered the information for you. So you need to have an arrangement, which is, all of this is in Title 24, Title 20, I guess, regulations. And it describes that we as a provider need to have a digital signature from the liability partner, which is the contractor. So if you want your rater to apply that for you, that's fine. You can do that. But you need to, through our system, you need to make an arrangement with that person to give him signature authority or her signature authority. Now this is something you might not want to do initially. You still have to register your signature with us so that if you're putting it on the documents, and many of you will be, or a secretary in your office or some kind of an administrative person in your office, your finance person, somebody might be putting it on our registry, then that person needs to be able to log in with their name and password and log it in for you as the contractor. All of that's okay, but it needs to be, there's a process where you have to get your signatures in so that they can be validated electronically now and in the future. And I'm going to say a thing about passwords and logins. First, I'll finish this. So then the rater does enter the CF3R. You can't enter that for him or her. They enter a 3R on every job, but again, one of them may be the sampled one, so they didn't really go to that house. They went to a different one, but looped this one in. And the way this happens for sampling is that you do, maybe you send the rater over the fax, let's say, 12 jobs that you've done. And he picks 7 of those and groups them together, and then goes out and selects one that he doesn't tell you which one he's going to go do. And so he goes out and he tests that house, but he's already got these other 6 associated houses locked into this group. Now, if this house passes, the group passes and they're all 7 are done. But if this house fails, then that one has to be fixed and retested, and another house in that same group, you can't unlock the group and change it. Another house in that group needs to be tested by the rater. And then when that passes, it can go on. So that's one of the slight detriments to sampling. If you have a lot of those failures, your rater comes out quite a bit. So sometimes there are people who test 100%, just the rater comes out and does it. Something else. You can have the rater do your testing for you. You have to sign the document and the liability. But if you don't have a duct blaster that day, or don't want to have one ever, you can actually have your rater do the contractor's testing and enter it, and then he'll enter the CF3R, the rater will enter his own form with his signature on it, but at that point you don't do any sampling. That's all 100%. And right now our registry shows about a 60-40 split on that. About 40% of contractors in the alterations changeout side of our business do 100% testing. They just have a rater that they work with. He might have 3 or 4 employee raters under him, and they go out there and do their stuff. So that's talking about how sampling works and how business models can work together. Okay? Secure login and password. Okay, you guys are busy. You're doing the sales. You don't want to putz around in a computer. So you have your administrative assistant do that work for you. That's a good thing. Don't give her your password or login, because if anything goes wrong, we come after the person who logged in and did the work. That's how we know who people are. So that's fine. It doesn't cost anything. Everybody who needs to be entering stuff into our system needs their own login and password. And there's another thing. Your login and password tells us what you can see in the registry. So if you don't want your administrative assistant to see certain things, be able to say, pull up every job in some zip code. I don't know what an administrative assistant would do. But in any case, the point is your login and your password tells us who you are and what you can see. That's how we know that a building jurisdiction in the city of San Jose is not allowed to see the jobs that are being done in Bakersfield. So just have your person come in, call in or log in and get a password and a login of their own. It's a very easy process that we have done a gazillion times. Okay. Signature transfer handles all of these problems. So whoever's logged in, if they've got signature authority from you, then they can sign the documents for you. Okay. The building department, I was told there would be some building department people here. Are there some here? Nope. Well, yep, a few. Okay, good. Excellent. So same thing. Don't give that to your office manager or whatever. You're going to be gone for 6 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever. Just have them get their password, because it can cause real problems. And And it has. We've had to do investigations on people and look through this process. So we don't like to do that, but it happens occasionally. Okay, building departments can also see a status report on all jobs done or pending in real time right now. So if the rater has typed something in at the house and hit the enter button, nanoseconds later, a building official, if he happened to be looking, would see that job pop up on a status sheet. If you call the inspector and say, hey, I'm going to need you out there Thursday morning, 10 o'clock, or Thursday morning in your 2-hour window, or however your jurisdictions work, various ones, you know, I'm not telling building departments how to do their business. They can look on the registry very quickly, or they can have it sent to them via email. We can do all kinds of ways to inform the building department that the job is done. So they can go and look and see it. No CF3R in the registry? Don't bother going out there because the job is not done yet. So that's a thing that we believe will help. We're interested in getting feedback from building departments at how well that works for them. We haven't had any complaints in the last 6 years about that. So building departments will have a lot more access. They'll have places they can actually make communications back and forth a little bit too. Okay. The status report. Building departments or anybody else who has access to the job can print out the PDF of the form. So if you want them on paper, for whatever reason, then they're in the registry, but you just click the little PDF icon and here comes your form, and you can print it out or email it to someone or do whatever you want to do with your PDF. It has a watermark from the provider in the background. It has a gazillion digit registration number along the bottom. It has a time and date stamp down to the second of when the job was entered and registered. So there's quite a bit of information on there. And if you want to jimmy those up, go ahead. But it's a lot quicker just to do it's quicker to tighten up the ducts than it is to jimmy up the form. So anyway, that's something that we don't feel is going to be much of a problem. But people do Xerox them and try to submit the same one over and over again, which is why they're in the registry. And so if somebody has copied a bunch of these PDFs from one job and kind of made them try to look like different jobs, you can go into the registry and find out that those jobs aren't in there. So it's pretty well secured. Use it to avoid unnecessary trips and to confirm that all of HERS inspections. Here's a sample of a status page from the 2008 standards. It will look very similar in our particular registry. The other registries have some kind of other process. I haven't seen their stuff, so this is kind of what you'd be looking at. Notice there at the bottom, it says not complete, and there's another red button down there that says not paid. That means that we didn't get paid, so that's not released yet. We get payment. Sorry. The fee for the certificates ranging from $20 to $30, depending on how many tests you're doing. And we charge the rater. We do not bill contractors for anything. So if you're a contractor and you're entering a form and there's a fee for it, there's a pay as you go. You just you have to hit a credit card or something to pay as you go, because we don't want to send out 20,000 invoices every month. So it wouldn't be cost effective for anybody. So that's how we do that. Training on registry usage. We will be doing, I highly recommend when you get notices and things about webinars, how to work your websites. They're as intuitive as we can make them. Our particular one has a roadmap. It leads you to do number 1, do number 2, do number 3, do number 4. Do you want to change number 3? So it gives you a roadmap that's pretty easy to follow and gives you pretty much information. There will be webinars and with some online videos. Right now we have a few training videos on our registry, but they are for the old look of registry. We're giving it a brand new look and feel. We've doubled the pipeline of our server capacity. We've got more RAM and more quad-core processors in a secure facility that handles this kind of information. It's all encrypted, and on the way, it's dynamically encrypted. We have telephone support people for how to use the registry, and we have telephone support people for code questions or technical questions. You're up in an attic. You want to say, I don't know if I need to tighten this or do that. take a picture of it on your phone. You can email that to our tech department and they can answer you. At the beginning, it's going to be a lot of people asking a lot of questions, so we'll ask for as much patience as you can muster. But there's opportunities to get help with those things. Let's see, on smoking and access, I heard some questions that I wanted to address that Taff said too. I don't know what my time is, but I guess I'm close. Whether a HERS rater thinks something is accessible or not, you guys can work together on that. You and your rater are standing there. It's an 18-inch crawl space. You don't have any 18-inch guys hanging around. It's not accessible. In Colorado, when the new marijuana law passed, now everybody does a smoke test, even on a tight system. So these smoke tests will be, they're a little unusual at first. It's theatrical smoke, and so it's just vegetable oil going across a little burner, and it blows smoke right into the duct system. Then the HERS rater goes, tape that, tape that, tape that, you're done. So you work together on that point. The rater cannot do it for you. He cannot do anything in your system. He can't drill a hole. He can't wrap a piece of tape. You have to do that, but he can work with you to see, how and where to do that. I think that's all. There was a little question about homeowners doing their own work. So in that case, we might not have a contractor signed into the job, so we allow homeowners to sign in and do their own work. Remember that a HERS rater is a third-party individual. He's supposed to be hired by the homeowner, but because of industry marketing and business issues, the Energy Commission has allowed a third-party arrangement where the contractor can pay the HERS rater on behalf of the consumer. So you're still, that's part of a third-party agreement. You're basically just passing money from the homeowner to the rater through your contract process. Okay, so you just need to make sure that there's no entanglements there. That's kind of it for me. Anybody have any questions? Yeah, okay, so the devil's in the details. This was a 30,000 foot view, so I recommend watching the videos and webinars as best you can and trying to get help.
I'm with Butte County, so that's not your area, and we're a little different. We're very rural. We're about an hour and a half north of Sacramento, but we do have people here representing San Jose, so I may have to defer any questions that you have. Hopefully the ones that we have, the questions you have and the information I give you is kind of general information. We did request that the building officials attend. We invited them. Unfortunately, to let you know why they're not here is not because they didn't want to participate. It was just a conflict with their chapter meeting. So most of them are at that, and they have other things going with that, so they definitely had to attend that. So we do apologize that they weren't here. So I was asked to talk in regards to the building departments and how we work in regards to permits, inspections, and in that area. So anything you have, we'll see if we can answer for you. When is a permit required? I think most of you understand. Is this feeding back down here? A little higher. Sounds really loud up here. When's a permit required? I think most of you know that a permit's required anytime you're basically changing anything out. My suggestion, you're going to hear me say this over and over, and I apologize that we have to say this. We try to be consistent between jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but each jurisdiction maybe has their own little elements that apply to them. There's a difference between the coast versus the mountains versus inner city, rural, so there's a difference there, so we can't be totally 100% consistent. So a lot of times I'm going to tell you, you need to check what your local authority have in jurisdiction. It's a good rapport to build with them, to just go in and meet them, introduce yourself, get on friendly terms with them, find out if there's a stakeholder meeting that they have or a user group meeting where you can participate, give your input. Even if there's an email listserv, you might want to join that. I'll tell you that we hold stakeholder meetings every other month. It's an opportunity for contractors to come in, tell us if we're doing good or bad, what kind of changes they want, how we can help them with codes. Most of your jurisdictions will give you training as well. So take advantage of that and get to know your building officials. Your inspectors are also a resource. That's your other resource. They're the ones who are getting the training, and they're the ones who are inspecting this, so you need to build a relationship there. It kind of goes both ways in that sense. So there's a permit required. Permits required when you're changing out any of the appliances, if you're changing out ductwork, if you're adding, even if there was nothing there, say there was a wall furnace and now they're going to go put in a whole unit. Any of that kind of stuff definitely requires a permit. So you just definitely need to just check in. They'll have a list of when a permit's required, or what's applicable to requiring a permit. How do you apply for a permit? I did check in with the local jurisdictions, and I kind of got a feel of what they're all doing. Typically, you can go in, you can do it over the counter, you can do it online on some of them. Some of them even allow you to do it through email or through a fax. Again, you just check in with that jurisdiction you're working with, and then they can tell you how you can apply. A lot of times, if you have employees trying to sign for your permit, then what you need to do in that sense is make sure that you have that your employees are listed, that they can sign for that permit, and typically most building departments will accept that letter and keep that on file so that there's no issues with them coming in to pick up the permit. So a cost of a permit. This was interesting. You would think we would all be the same, but everybody has their own, and don't shoot the building department, because a lot of times it's not us that's creating those fees. It's actually the jurisdiction in itself. It may be that there's general plan fees that they have to tack on, or there's service fees that they have to tack on, or just some of them have energy fees that they tack on. You can go to your board meetings and council meetings when there's a fee change, and you can have your input. If you don't agree with that fee, you have that opportunity at that time to say something. So if you don't like the fees, then make sure that you take advantage of when they do a fee change to go in and speak to them about that. Most of the time, that's a public notice, so you don't even have to show up. You could send in a note to them. But the fees seem to range from, depending on what you're installing, obviously, but they range from anywhere from, it seemed to me like Santa Clara County, the lowest one was like about $159, whereas City of San Jose, they had several different fees. It started like $171.50 and went up to like $273.50. So there was a variance in there depending on what you're doing and what other fees apply to that. So you definitely need to check in to find out what the fee is so that when you bid your project, you're getting the right fee and then you cover your cost. Let's see what else. So energy standards, I'm not going to go over the energy standards. Tav did that. If you have any questions for Tav, he's still here. But basically, it's just the energy forms and being aware of what you need to submit and at what time. Some jurisdictions require certain forms right up front when you're applying, and some require them during certain phases of your inspection. And if there's HERS required, then you need to make sure that those forms are in. The last speaker, as he stated, don't call us if you require HERS rating tests and you haven't completed that final test. Just double check your work, make sure you're ready for that inspection. It's just like you, your time is as important as our time. And if you start calling us out over and over for a job for an inspection and it's not ready, then you kind of start building a reputation for yourself. So just be aware of that. Our time's important, your time is important. So make sure that you are ready for that inspection and you have the required forms. And if you're not familiar with the forms, take a few minutes out to go into that building department and make an appointment and say, hey, you know, I have a wall furnace, or I have a new heating and air system, or I got a duct system. What forms do you want and when I pull the permits for these? And then just make yourself a little cheat sheet, and that way you'll always know. And these days with email, it shouldn't be that hard to, if you're not sure, just send an email in, talk to the permit techs. They usually help you out. In regards to the energy standards for single-family dwelling, for the non-res, for plan requirements, basically you have to have your energy submittal package. You have to have your energy calcs. You have to make sure that, don't submit them if they say building does not comply. And you might laugh and think, does somebody do that? They do it all the time. They always submit and it's incomplete. Make sure that all the information matches. We get a lot of times when it gets busy, we'll get where, on a non-res job where they'll submit calcs for another job because they just want to get it in. And then it doesn't even match that plan. So make sure that whatever you're submitting, or maybe you have 3 single-family dwellings going, and you have 3 energy calcs, but you don't Maybe two are for the city, and then one might be for the county, but you mix up the calcs. So just double check your paperwork when you bring it in, and make sure you have the appropriate paperwork. As far as what needs to be on the plans, again, you have to go to the AHJ. They vary, unfortunately, but the way to look at it is, if you were to go out there and look at that to see how something runs, what would you want to be looking at? So manufacturers' installations are important, making sure that the sizing is there, knowing that you check the electrical and the gas lines, the sizing, you know, especially if it's existing. You want to make sure that, kind of let us know that you've checked into that. They may only had I keep going to a wall furnace because it's what we deal with a lot. They might have only had a wall furnace, but now you're putting in this whole new system. Make sure that all the sizing is there and available to them, that they do have the right size electrical panel for that. And inspections, when are inspections necessary? Typically, they'll tell you right up front when you apply for that permit that we require an installation one, or we want to see it at final. It varies, it depends on the extent of the job as to what we need to look at. You definitely want to know, but I do have to tell you that we will not send inspectors out to a house if they have underage children in the house. So if the homeowner is going to be there for the inspection for us, then you need to make sure that the homeowner is aware that an adult needs to be present. Because many times we cannot do that inspection if there's a young teenager there, or if there's even just young kids. We're just not allowed to go in. Even if there's like 3 or 4 kids with a teenager, we cannot go into that house if they're under 18. Excuse me?
Can you send the customer to go and pull the permits?
You know, we have that happen all the time. Dave's going to go over who can pull permits and what, but in regards to pulling a permit, an owner builder can pull the permit. You know, my preference as a building official is I would like to see if the contractor's the one who's got the job and install it, I want to see them come in and pull the permit. But what we'll do is they have a form that they have to fill out. There's 12 little notes on there if you're pulling it as owner builder, telling them the liability, the fact that this is usually work done by a contractor, kind of that they're acting as the contractor and they become liable for all that. And they literally have to initial each statement, and then they have to sign it, and then we confirm that they are who they are with a driver's license or some kind of ID. But yes, an owner builder, it can pull the permit on behalf and list the contractor, or they can pull it as an owner builder, or you can even have a contractor's employee come in if they have a letter on file saying they can sign for that business. And then we check licenses and everything on there and the insurance.
Is this going to have any effect on pulling a permit online?
You know, I don't know how others have it set up online, but we have it set up on our, Butte County has it online, and what it does is we have certain contractors who have already cleared with us. We have their information in there, so it's connected. So if you go in and in our database, which is connected directly to CSLB's licensing database, if your insurance is expired or your license is expired, our software picks that up and will deny the permit. So in that sense, it won't allow you to pull the permit.
All the AIR's forms and all that?
We have the forms where you download, it tells you to print these out. You'd have to check with the local jurisdiction. Some of them, they've been able to go online, but they haven't been able to do the forms yet, so they'll tell you that you need to print them out, and they'll give you a website to go to print them out. They'll do it that way, or they'll give their own link.
I'm a subcontractor most of the time, and if I'm told that permits are being handled by the general contractor or by the homeowner general, what are the ramifications if those permits are not pulled? What am I risking?
Dave, will you be covering that more so? I think that's more in Dave's field, because that's on your license. To me, I would say if you are the one who's doing the work, you're saying you're the one who's doing the work?
A lot of times it's a new construction site where there's several subcontractors for every trade, and the general contractor is by contract pulling all the permits. So if for some reason that general contractor doesn't do it, I'm concerned of what the ramifications are for me.
I can speak only for myself. My husband and I had a heating and air business. I didn't do any of the work with them, but he was the holder on that. And the one thing that I always told him to do is, if you're working under a general like that, you need to go in and just confirm that they have a permit. It's not that hard to do. These days, it's easy to just go on the website and confirm that there's a permit there, because we list them. I can guarantee you like 98% of all of them are out there, and they list every permit, and then they list what it's for. And if you don't see a permit for that address, then you know it wasn't pulled. Or you could call in, it may not be there if it's fairly new, but pretty much within, I would say, 24 to 48 hours, the permit should be reflected somewhere. It's easy as a phone call or an email. If you do an email, you can always give the email to the general contractor, says, hey, they say you don't have a permit, here's the proof. Was there another question over here? Okay. Who must be present? I think we kind of covered that. That's up to you. I always find that if the contractor's there, then I don't have to write a lot of corrections. I don't have to write things down. We can talk about it. They can get it fixed right there on the spot. They might have an answer why they didn't do something or why something is a certain way. Or like I said, in the case of, we can do it with homeowners. You're busy, so you have to go on to the next job. And so you say to the homeowner, we got this inspection scheduled. Here's the permit cards. If they have any questions, call me. You can work it that way as well. But, I would just say make sure that if you're going to do it in that sense, follow through. Find out how the inspection went, answer the questions, ask the questions. It's not required that you be there, but I think in the case of the indoor, somebody has to be there because we have to have access. A lot of times we do gain entry when you sign your permit. Most of your permits on the bottom, I don't know where they put it, most of them at the very bottom when you're signing, literally you're agreeing and allowing us and giving us permission to enter that property to do the inspection. So that is our right to go onto the property. It's our right of entry. So we don't really need somebody there unless it's indoors, and then the house is locked. We want somebody with us, protection of all of us in that sense. And obtaining final inspection. As contractors, you guys are the experts, you guys, gals, everybody's the experts out here. You probably know your business better than we know it as inspectors. We go through code training. We get every 3 years is new stuff. I got to tell you, with the new energy, it's pretty serious. There's a lot of new stuff going on. It's hard to keep up with it. We're still learning it. We can work together on learning that. Sometimes you guys teach us something that we don't know. Sometimes we'll teach you something. But the biggest problem that we run into as building officials and inspectors is it's not necessarily that you're not pulling the permit, it's you're not getting the inspections for the permit. You're not finaling the permit. I had one where we had a company, and I think it was about 4 years ago, I'm in a smaller jurisdiction, so it was like 59 permits this guy pulled in 1 year, and he never got a final inspection. He just pulled them. We never got to see his work. When I saw him at the home show, and he's asking me, hey, let me tell you, I says, well, wow, you never final your permits, So it's like, be careful there. It's your reputation. If you really care about that license and you really care about what you're doing, that inspection should be just as important to you as your licenses and your reputation, because that's what sells you. Then you can use that. Hey, I've been working with the building department for 15, 20 years, and you can talk to them. I got a good rapport with them. I passed my inspections. We have no problems. It's a bonus for you. It's a second set of eyes looking at that. If something goes wrong, this is another group that can help you out. Well, we went out there. This is what we saw. It's a backup. This is your protection for the consumer, but protection for the contractor. So if there was one thing, I'd say definitely going away today, if you got some permits out there and you didn't find them, you definitely want to call in and kind of get that going. And if a permit expired, all you have to do is check in with that the local authority, having jurisdiction, the local building department, and ask them, well, how does your expiration work? Can I just renew that permit? Do I have to pull a new permit? Most of the time with miscellaneous, we call this miscellaneous permit because it's a direct trade permit. Usually it's just one trade. Might have a little bit of electrical or something or plumbing, but those ones, they just usually have you have a flat rate to renew, or you may have to pull the initial permit and it's that cost. It's not really that costly to go ahead and reopen that permit. The thing you'd have to be careful about is if your permit expired, if it was a non-res type project, They may have you update a little bit for the newer codes if there's been a code change in between. So you just have to be careful about that. And that's another thing you don't want to deal with. So it's another reason why to get a final inspection on your permits. Failure to obtain a permit, penalty assessments, and inspection after installation. All right. If you don't get a permit, Dave's going to go over licensing. I think he'll cover that. But the point is that if we start seeing like that gentleman, that one company that had 59, we turned them into CSLB. It just gets to that point where we have to protect the consumer. There's a safety factor. You could, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong if something's not installed properly and it hasn't been inspected. You hear all the time about flue pipes be installed improperly, and then people end up dying. I mean, it can be really serious. And like I said, this is a benefit to you that we do that inspection. So if you don't obtain a permit, you're going to end up likely being turned in. And is it at the cost of your license? You worked pretty hard to get that license. So I think it's really important that stand behind your license, get the permits that you need to have to go with that. Penalty assessments, they get pretty big. Most of them are the cost of the original permit, so the fee becomes double. There's several of them when I checked with them that said that first time is double the permit, second time is triple the permit, the third time is 10 times the permit, and it goes on from there. So you have to be very careful because you don't want to start getting into all those additional fees because then you just lost your profit on your job by paying an assessment fee there. And inspection after installation. Again, I'm going to have to do that saying, refer to your authority having jurisdiction. Depends on the job. We have a lot of situations, I hate to admit to this, but we actually have people who build whole houses without permits. We're very rural, they get up in the mountains, and our code enforcement is complaint driven. So if nobody sees that going in, we don't follow lumber trucks or whatever to job sites. So sometimes a house or a structure will go in. And so then what happens is finally it'll come back to us because somebody's going to try to sell that property or somebody's going to buy that or there'll be some kind of construction going on next door and then we see that and then we realize, hey, what's a house doing over there? In that case, we will go out on a full house like that. And after the fact, it can be like almost triple to quadruple the price to get those permits and get that straightened out. Because now you're talking about getting engineers involved. They have to claim it's structurally sound. As far as mechanical systems, we'd probably have some experts write a letter saying that it's mechanically sound, it operates. We might even have to have you expose parts so that we can see it. In some cases, you may have to redo it. You may have to reinstall it. So that after the permit, it's, inspection after installation, that's worst case. Now, if it's where you maybe just did it today and you realize, you know what, I forgot to get the permit, I need to get a permit, let me go in. Some of the guys are pretty smart and they don't tell me they already installed and they say, hey, well, I'm doing this job over here, when can you come out? And then a lot of times when we get out there, we realize they had already installed it and then we try to work with them at that point because to us, the ultimate goal is compliance and being able to perform the inspection, have the proper permits. It's not, can we get them? It's got nothing to do with that. It's the safety, protection for you and protection for the consumer. So that's what's truly important to us. So our goals are the same. Have it installed properly, have it working efficiently, and having a happy customer in the end. So I went a little fast, I think, or maybe right on schedule. So anybody have any other questions?
A lot of wall heaters. We'll do like a service call on a weekend, and a wall heater's failed, and I'll go out maybe on Monday morning because they have no heat. I don't need a permit to start the job as a heating contractor. So my question is, how much time do I have to get that permit?
I would check. I think the code book. I think it says there's some that say 24 hours, and then there's some that say 72 hours. I think it is the 3 days or something like that. If you do a lot of those kind of calls, because some heat and air services, that's the kind of service you do, is you're reporting to calls like that. I would go in and talk to your AHJ and work out some kind of a program with them where you can fax in or email in, hey, I was on this job this weekend, I'll be in by Monday or Tuesday, here's what we did. We do that with electrical panels. We have a lot of ag pumps that will go out in the summer, and the electrician needs to go out there and do that. So the electrical contractors will come into us and they clear with us. We check their license, we check their workers, their workman's comp. We kind of go back and look at permit history. Did we have problems with them? Were they repeat violators? Did they not pull permits? And then we kind of build a rapport and we put them on the list.
Like 1 day or 3 days, that's
Yeah.
all I was asking.
And so that's what you do is, I think it's 3 days. And that's literally in the code book. I think it is a statement in there. But I still, if that's something you do, I would build up that rapport and do that. And then follow it up with an email, say, I'll be in Monday to pick this up. I did this on Saturday. Any other questions? All right, you guys are easy. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Nancy. Okay, our next speaker this morning is Dave Fote. Dave is the Chief of Enforcement for the Contractors Board. He's been in that position, I believe, about 13 years now.
Well, thank you. I'm sure you've all heard that adage, I'm from the government and I want to help. And my goal today, though, is to make that true. And I believe that we have a real opportunity in your industry to market your businesses to consumers, to show consumers that they have a financial incentive to hire you to obtain the permit, get it inspected, and get it finalized. And I'm going to share with you some strategies that we put together to achieve that. We're going to talk a little about an education campaign. We're going to talk about what we can provide to you. So when you go out at the point of sale, you can provide information to your customer. We're going to talk about how you can turn in your competitors that are cheating in an easy way and what the penalties are. The penalties not only for your competitors that aren't playing by the rules, but also what penalties are there for homeowners that are conspiring with contractors to cheat. This here is an energy calculator. How many of you are aware of PG&E's or Silicon Valley Power's energy calculator? Have anybody used that here? In putting this together, we wanted to provide to you a screenshot of PG&E or Silicon Valley, because I believe that's the energy providers for Santa Clara County. They have it, and you'll receive more information. It's in your packet on how it can be used. But unfortunately, you've got to roll your mouse over it to bring up the window, and it didn't provide for printing out and including in the screenshot. But what's interesting about this is when I did it, I found that my energy cost was about 30% of my bill. And you'll see that we have a statewide calculation as to what a monthly average is. But for a lot of people in larger homes, it can be $400 to $500. And so if you're losing 30% of your energy efficiency and your bill, I'll talk about my sister for a minute. She has like a 5,000 square foot house. She's got young children living in that house. Her bill is always over $400. She's paying out $120 a month that she wouldn't have to if she did the job right. And that's what the message needs to be to consumers, that when you do the job right, you're going to recoup the investment. And we're also going to talk a little bit about when you're bidding the job. That was a question that was asked. What is the cost when you go out to bid the job? If you're going to get the permit, you're going to get the HERS rater, and you got to seal the ductwork. Well, what I heard today is the average permit cost is about $150 to $200. A HERS rater, depending on the volume, can be up to $300. So let's round that off at $500 and say if I'm going to do the job right, my bid's going to be $500 more than my competitor. Well, if you're armed with knowledge and with our publications, that should not be an insurmountable cost to overcome. I would think most homeowners would be more than willing to pay an additional $500 to receive a 30% reduction in their energy costs over the life of that system. Now, we don't know what the sealing of the ductwork is going to cost. I've talked to some contractors and I've gotten different opinions. Some tell me it's around $600, could be more. But the question was, what happens after the HERS rater tests the system and we find the ductwork is leaking? Well, that's a change order. You got to be reasonable about it. It's got to be market price, but that's going to be an additional cost. And my statement to all of you is, I believe that homeowners are going to be more than willing to pay for that change order to get that job right, to get that permit final. And so we're going to talk about the ambassador letter after we finish the slides. What happens though if you go out and you do the work without obtaining the permit, or you know a competitor that did the installation without a permit? What most contractors don't understand is that our board has adopted a zero tolerance policy. And what that means is that if we receive information that you performed work that required a permit, you didn't have one, and that's reported to our Intake Mediation Center. And I want to recognize Scott Weber. Put your hand up. He's the manager over the Intake Mediation Center, but also he's in charge of our permit compliance program. What happens is if we receive word that you did work without a permit, you got to go down immediately. You need to get the permit. You're going to pay the penalties. You're going to have to do whatever is necessary at your expense to bring that project into compliance with code requirements. You see, when that's known, that takes the financial incentive out of cheating, because now you've got to do the work at your expense, and you're not going to be entitled to getting a change order. What happens if a contractor says, I won't do it? Well, the first offense can provide for revocation of your license. At some point, the legislature made it a very serious penalty. If you do work without a permit, you can have your license revoked. Do we do that regularly? No. What we would generally do, though, is maybe a first-time offender, send it to our arbitration program. That's binding. There'll be a monetary award. We can also issue a citation. And I'm going to show you some statistics in just a moment. This is the permit complaint form, something that, again, he manages and oversees. You can file permit complaints anonymously, online. If you've gone out and bid a job, you didn't get it, you see a vehicle pull up, and they're obviously installing a unit, the building department has no record of a permit, you ought to report that. You do it anonymously. Scott and his crew will take a look at it, and if they have enough evidence, they will hold that contractor accountable, and again, that can be an administrative action. Here are some of the statistics. They're not huge, but if you went to 2011, you wouldn't see numbers at all. So what we had in 2013 is 225 citations, and we had 61 accusations to revoke licenses. And one of the goals that we have, though, and that's why we're so pleased to be here in Santa Clara County today, is we want to publicize the actions that we're taking. We look for this as an opportunity to come out to try to provide you information how you can comply with the law, but also to market your businesses, and then to highlight those that are continuing to cheat in July of 2014. And we need that information from you, and you'll see these numbers increase. I think you all have somebody on your staff that's knowledgeable and can uncover or identify illegal practice. This is Enzo. This is our enforcement mascot. You'll see that he's an expert in remodeling. He's not an expert in heating and air conditioning, because you know what? I've learned today, this is difficult work. You need training. You need to be skilled to be out doing it. We have Mike Lee, as you know, as the manager of the Joint Enforcement Strike Force. He's going to talk a little bit about partnering and how you can also report violators or competitors that are cheating in tax and insurance issues. What we focus a lot on, though, is the license, the permit, and the workers' comp. And you'll see that our stop order authority now, we've had 610 stop orders issued in 2013. And that's where you have a contractor that has a license generally, or maybe doesn't, but has employees and no workers' comp. We were granted the authority to issue a stop order that does not provide or allow for employee labor from that point forward until they have a workers' comp policy. And so I just wanted to make you all aware of that it's been successful in helping to compel your competitors to get a workers' comp policy. It's been one of the things that we focused on, because of those of you that have workers' comp, you're paying up to 4 times more than you would have to if your competitors were paying workers' comp for their employees. So it's a significant problem. I always throw out this number because I just think it really shows how dramatic the advantage somebody has is cheating. If you are a roofing contractor, your workers' comp rates are going to be at least 20% of your payroll. If you're paying 4 roofers over a course of 12 months, you're going to be paying them $50,000 a month, $200,000. You're writing a check at the end of the year for $40,000. Your competitor's not writing that same check. And that's why we have to continue to look at this. I mean, I'm right there with you. The workers' comp rates are too high. We need to look for ways to bring them down. If you want to report any type of a lead as it relates to unlicensed practice, no workers' comp, or somebody working without a permit, we are there to receive that lead, and you'll see what can happen with them. I believe our numbers for our prosecutor referrals are almost, probably second to none with, as you'll see, over 2,600 referrals in the last 2 years. It was really gratifying to have the assistant DA here today who prosecutes a lot of our cases. And some of you are going to say, well, how are you going to publicize all this? Well, quite frankly, we're going to work with Scott Sway, and we're going to publicize the stings that we're going to conduct. Now, generally, they're going to relate to unlicensed practice. But if we can tie in the consumer harm and the message that we have today, we're going to get a lot of publicity for this campaign at no cost. And this is just something else I wanted to share you with. Hopefully you're receiving information on the stings that we conduct, whether we call them the California blitzes or we're doing stings with other states. But Pioneer really stood out. This is a small town near Sacramento, and we're calling people up off of Craigslist. And who's coming out to these jobs? Well, are out to bid. These are people with active warrants. They're registered. They're sex offenders that aren't registering. There's all kinds of things happening that consumers need to be aware of. They really need to be educated to hire somebody that's licensed, that has a track record, that has a bond, that you can check their complaint history. And I think Pioneer Sting really showed, and we didn't know most of these people had these backgrounds, but that's who comes out. We had a sting out of Mendocino County where somebody showed up and had been convicted of murdering a convenience store clerk. They're out bidding work now that they've been released. And what I'm going to show you in a second is some of the new strategies that we have. We're always looking for ways to be more effective. And either it's, we're looking for proactive opportunities, and we're going to show you what we're doing with trailing people from supply houses to working with other states. But also, what can we do to try to educate the public? And one way we do that is by partnering with DAs, and that's why we had Scott Sway open this meeting up, because if we've warned a contractor and they're continuing to offend, generally it's for not having a license, we want that contractor to be criminally prosecuted. And we've developed relationships with county DAs throughout the state, including Santa Clara County, where they give us a DA investigator to go out and to inspect. And it's been very effective in looking at unlicensed and uninsured contractors. I'm going to show you a sting. I think you're going to really enjoy it. You're going to be introduced to George Stanley. He's a proficient transient criminal. George Stanley does paving work, comes in, puts paving down that's of no value. It costs more to replace it than generally what you've paid. You may have paid $20,000. Also, we have a joint sting that we're going to show you we did with Nevada. We just did one a couple of weeks ago where we call out their unlicensed people. They call out ours to get arrested on both sides of the border. And we have trailing from supply houses. And Tom O'Hare in the back, Tom, he is the one that produced this, and I believe you're going to really enjoy it.
Please, hands up against the wall. Against the wall. Don't move. Weapons? No. Phalanx? Yep. You have a warrant for your arrest?
Hello, yeah. I would defend my class. You're under arrest.
What?
I'm an undercover investigator with the contractors board. This is
You're kidding me. Put your hands behind your back, Clint.
No, don't do this to me, please.
Clint.
What?
Hands behind your back out here.
Oh, don't do this.
Clint.
You're an
Oh my
unlicensed-
God.
You're an unlicensed contractor.
Give me your pen down.
Oh, please don't do this to me. Oh my God, don't do this to me.
Clint, if you stay cooperative, you'll be in and out of here with a citation. You won't go to jail.
Yes.
Oh my God.
But unfortunately, without knowing it, you're kind of ripping off the contractors that are playing by the rules, because it's not fair to them. They're paying for a license and a bond and insurance, and you don't have to do any of that, so you can underbid them, and that makes it not fair. So that's the other reason we do these. We want to make it fair for everybody. I'm Heather Francis with the Contractors Board. This is an undercover sting operation.
Oh, great.
Can I find your back, please? Right here?
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, I needed to work bad.
I know, so do other licensed contractors need work too. Everybody needs work.
$5,000 for everything. Take about 2 weeks. That'll give you time to do your flooring and countertop and.
Hey, you're the
That'll
boss,
work.
allegedly.
Got it. All right. You bet. Do you have a contractor's license? Oh yeah. Yeah, it'll be on the top of my estimate that I fax you. In California? No. Okay. Well, my name's Jeff, and I'm with the Contractors Board. This is a sting operation in the state of California. All right. We're police officers with Nevada County. Holy smokes! What a rush! You got the hair standing up. Actually, I need over there. Do you have any ID on you, sir? Yeah. God, Lord. You never did work over here. Until today? Yeah. First time? I swear. Oh. I'm a small guy, man.
Yeah, there is at the bottom there.
Oh, there it is.
The surveillance portion of the operation took place over a 2-day period, beginning in the early morning shortly after supply houses opened for business. CSLB investigators took up positions at almost 12 different supply houses in the Santa Monica, Culver City area, just north of the Los Angeles International Airport. Investigators watched as vehicles, both marked and unmarked, showed up and started loading up materials for a busy day on the job. Now with the surveillance finished, it was time to invite targets to an undercover sting. Less than a week after the supply yard surveillance took place, a sting was scheduled at a single-family home in Culver City. One of the suspects appeared to recognize a CSLB investigator from the supply yard.
You recognize me? We met. I think so, yes. Okay. You gave me your card in front of Express, I think it's Express Plumbing Supply? Yeah. Okay. Are you ready for it? Yeah, we're ready for it. So come on back here.
The fifth set of the day resulted in a suspect being cited for illegal advertising.
See that red? Yes. Expired.
Acting in the capacity of a contractor and displaying a license not issued to him. In addition to those misdemeanor citations, he was driving with an expired driver's license. Inside his truck, officers found what may be rock cocaine. That earned him a trip to jail, and his truck a trip to the impound yard.
No weapons, nothing illegal on you? No, sir. Okay, my check.
This suspect claimed to have a CSLB sting premonition.
Okay, I'm with the contractor state license board. This is an undercover sting operation.
I did have a little feeling about it. It's awesome.
Oh man, I'm getting busted. I know. I just knew it. I honestly knew it.
That was very good. Thank you. And so we have here his contact information if we can help you. And actually, everyone but Nisa's here today. We have Leanne and Melissa. You met out front. They do public works mainly, but they're well experienced in just about any phase of CSLB regulation. In your packet, though, let's turn to the letter. It says, Dear Property Owner. I just want to quickly walk you through this. This is our first conference of this type, and I need your feedback as to whether you think this will work. And I'm hoping that a building department will step up and want to be part of the pilot. And I would hope that would be San Jose, because they're here today. Because what we want to see is that we can make an improvement in permit compliance. That we could check our permit records for last year and compare them to this year, July 31st going forward. Now you'll see this letter, and what it does is it tells the consumer that they're going to have a return on their investment when they hire you, someone that's going to obtain the permit and have a HERS rater come out if necessary. And I learned something this morning, that it's not every job that has to be inspected. But we do want the permit obtained and we want it finalized. You're providing to them a checklist on how they can protect themselves should they make the wrong choice and hire one of your competitors that would try to rip them off. On the next page, and we're going to work on coming up with something from PG&E, but what we're showing is how much they can save on their utility bill, and we're providing information to them on how they can go to their Santa Clara County provider, put their address in, put in how many children they have, the square footage of their house, how often they're in the house, and they can figure out what their monthly energy use is for heating and cooling their home. And so all that information is in the letter. We would also hope that you're proud to tell your potential client that you have liability insurance. If you have it, it's not required by law, but that's another way you can market your business. The page that follows is a license check. This is actually our undercover license that we used. But you should be proud that you have a contractor's license, that you have a license bond, and you have workers' comp if you have employees. That's all on this page. This could be in your folder. We have a sample folder. If you want to call us, we can provide to you. I had become aware, though, that most contractors have their own folders with logos. And so our thought is you would put this material into your folder. The next page, completely optional, but it's a publication that can be downloaded from the CSLB website on what a consumer should look for when they're hiring a contractor. Again, free pamphlet, you can download it. I believe we can also provide you copies if you wish. And then we have our 10 tips, again, on the website. It's up to you if you want to include this. But I would hope that you would step up, you would let us know you want to be part of this pilot program, that you're going to go out at point of sale, you're going to hand out that letter, you're going to hand out some of this material, and then we're going to work with your local building official to see if it's working. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Yes, sir.
So is it against the law to hire a non-licensed contractor? I mean, as a consumer, can I hire a non-licensed contractor
Yeah,
and
well,
have no repercussions?
Here's the repercussions, and it's changed a little bit. The contractors board has no authority over that homeowner. Now, there's a couple things that are happening, though, that I heard earlier. If you go down as a homeowner and you fill out a permit, as an owner builder, you're going to need to include whether you have a contractor, and so what's the license number, or do you have employees? You need to provide your workers' comp. Now, they tend to be cheating. They don't do either. They say I have no employees, no contractor. So what the labor code says is that if you have hired someone for which a license is required, and a license is required to install HVAC units, then that person who is unlicensed becomes your employee. And if that person becomes your employee, you're required to have workers' comp, and you're required to register with DDD. Now, I've had a recent meeting with Division of Labor Standards Enforcement's attorney regarding this, and she agrees with that for the most part, but also what she said, if it's relatively minor, and you have a homeowner's insurance policy, may pick up for some of the minor work. But we have been partnering with DLSE where homeowners have been cited for being an employer without workers' comp. So that's a liability for them. Now, as far as falsifying the permit, who would enforce that? Only times I've seen that done has been like a DA or a city attorney, and it's only in the egregious cases where somebody has built a second or third story. So it's a problem. It would be nice if we could get a legislator to carry a bill to allow for penalizing homeowners for engaging in this. But I've talked to various legislators about it, and they said, you know what, I'd never get reelected. So that's been the downside, but they're taking a huge risk. I can just quickly share this story. On Mendocino Coast, we had a lady that hired a roofer that rolled off the roof, got injured, went to the uninsured employers benefit trust fund. That's what happens when you have a worker and no workers' comp. They go to that trust fund, you're paying into that fund. That fund paid out to that worker, but also EDD, I don't know if Mike Lee's are familiar with this, looked at whether she was withholding taxes. And the homeowner was assessed $40,000. I got the word of it. I think Leanne actually was the investigator in this case. And we thought, well, that seems a little strange. I mean, she's like in her 70s or something. Well, Leanne ended up talking to her son, who said, you know what, why this is appropriate? My mom's always hiring unlicensed people, and this is an appropriate penalty for her. So that's the true story, and that's what the penalty can be, and it can be serious. You have a question?
Okay, Mr. David, let's say we live in an expensive area, the Bay Area. People build basements, garage, everything, with no permits. We go up there, and we tell them we need to get a permit to install the furnace, to replace it, or the air conditioner, and they don't want it. Do we have it signed a waiver because 5 years later they sell the house, and here we are, we put the furnace, they see with no permit because they didn't want it, because they didn't want the inspector to come and see the illegal garage. I mean, I'm saying this because we live in a real expensive area. People need to have, other people to help them pay the rent, the mortgage. what we'll do, how can we get away with being our license revoked?
Well, I would, that's a question we need to work with the building official on. Are they willing to go out and address what a permit was obtained for and not address other issues that aren't life safety? I don't know. I think that would be a conversation with the building official. But the way the law is, if you did work, whether somebody else was to get the permit or you know there wasn't one, you're in violation of the law. That's the problem. So if somebody turns you in, you could be cited for it. That's the problem. Yes, sir. You lose a job.
You have a customer that you go out to give a quote to. This happens not routinely, but it does happen, and they do not want a permit. And we tell them, well, you know, if you don't pull a permit, you know, workman's comp, somebody gets hurt. It's basically what you just said. I don't care about that. I don't want a permit. Is it our obligation to let you know that?
Well, I just heard, you know what, I just lost the job, and that's really irritating. I lost the job because I won't do it without a permit, and if that would be a job site that you want to report. Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you're willing to do that, but I would do it anonymously. Absolutely.
I think the question is, as a contractor, if I have a client that does not want a permit, is there a form or a waiver that I can have that homeowner sign that transfers the responsibility from me as the contractor to the homeowner? So if I do that work without a permit, I'm not liable?
Well, there's no such form. And the rest of yours, unless you've made one up, but no. The problem's going to be when they turn around and report you or somebody else reports you. I mean, I hope that in this county we can launch this campaign and convince these homeowners to not do it. That's what our goal has to be. You may do that and we would never find out about it. Maybe nobody here would report you. You'll get away with it. But what happens if that homeowner decides, you know what, you did that job, and now I want you to come back at your expense to get a permit and do all this work at your expense without them paying a dime for it? They may want to do it, and we're in communication right now with the Public Utility Commission and the Bay Area Energy Network about publicizing this campaign. So we don't want that to happen to you. Yes.
This may be a little bit unusual question, but I wanted to know if a contractor, a licensed contractor did work and did not pull a permit, and then several months later, you know, they canceled their license or it was withdrawn or whatever. Is it still, would it be worthwhile to report them afterwards so that in the future they can't, you know, get a new license, or this would go on their record?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, they may have gotten another license, or if somebody's been financially harmed, there's still a bond that could be claimed. And we may want to flag that contractor and then meet with them before reissuing a license. So I would report them.
Goes back to my earlier question. A lot of times we do general contractor work who pull the permits. It comes down to responsibilities. It's our responsibility to ensure that they got the permit. If we did the work and it found out that they really didn't get the permit, isn't the responsibility on the general contractor?
Well,
not on us?
let me give you an example. Well, you as the HVAC contractor, if you did the install without a permit, you can be held accountable for that, as can the prime. But we had a case where with Home Depot where they had a sub and they take money to get permits, and their sub did not get permits for numerous water heaters throughout the state. Well, we took action against the sub for not getting the permits, but the DAs held Home Depot accountable with unfair business practices for all of those violations. But that's why it's really incumbent upon you to ask that general, you got a permit for this project, does it include the HVAC? You really have to do it. Well, I sense I'm not giving you the answer that you want. I may not conclude with a standing ovation. Still hopeful. Okay. All right. One more question.
We lose that job to that client that doesn't want to pay for the permits. That's money out of all of our pockets. How are we guaranteed that you're going to go get them?
Well, do you know who the name of the contractor?
There's plenty of them out there. The ones that aren't here.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's a good point.
It's-
So
it's-
that's actually that's a really good point. And that's what we were going to look at, too. I think we sent out it was 450 letters, and there's 73 of you here. What we're going to be doing, though, is conducting stings, and we've done them throughout the state already. We haven't done this county. We've called out over 100 contractors. We're going to focus, though, on those targets that you bring to us instead of just randomly looking for people, because we want to go after those that are creating problems for you. I can't guarantee that we'll catch that person, but I can guarantee that we'll try. And not only that, but when we have success, we're going to publicize it. That's our goal. Okay? Yeah, there's another program that we've launched, and actually Nancy Springer, as building official at Butte, was instrumental with this. In her county, they've really had some great programs, and one is for the pool industry. You can't get a permit unless you have workers' comp, and they post it on the garage, so it really makes everyone aware that you've got a pool going on and you've got workers' comp. She also, in Butte, has launched what we call the Eyes on Site program, and that's where we pay members of our industry expert program to kind of be our eyes out in the field, to observe this type of thing, to call us up, and we've hired former retired CHP officers and lieutenants that go out and investigate. So in your situation, you've got a suspect job site, maybe we should start something up here. We pay their gas, that's what they get paid, but they go out and they look and they say, yes, looks like an installation's going on, and then we pay a retired CHP officer to go out and investigate. Yes.
Dave, your database talks about not listing a contractor who hasn't paid his workman's comp and so forth. Our registry our database pings your database. Whenever a contractor enters his number, we ping that. It automatically does a check right there. My question is, how up to date is that? Because we don't look for workman's comp. We just look, is this guy a licensed contractor and is he active? So how recent is your workman's comp information relative to that?
Well, if they have state fund, it's transmitted electronically. It's updated, daily or almost on the moment. Now, if it's a private carrier, there can be a delay. They got to send it to us. But there's the Workers' Compensation Insurance Rating Bureau has a website that we could check out. If you see there's an exemption on file and you think that's suspicious, you should report it, and we'll go the extra mile to find out if they actually have a policy and just failed to notify us of it.
And I could add another point. If your question also is how current is the information you're looking up on our website, that's instantaneous. So if some change is made, some license is suspended for any reason, as soon as it gets input into our system, anytime somebody comes to do that license check, that's instantaneous. So it's not like a day or two delay, it's instantaneous.
I do have questions regarding to some of the experiences that I have had. To me, it feels that we should have a better definition of homeowner contractor to apply license and on and forth. Because, for all of us who play with the rules, how can we penalize the persons that doesn't play it? But not so much about just the worker or the contractor itself. What about the homeowner? What about all these real estate a realtor that hire their own crew to clean up their houses so that they can sell because they are the owner, so to speak, under their contract. So how are you being, how can we work in this area in terms of enforcement?
Dave, maybe what kind of information would be really beneficial if these guys see something happen out in the field? What kind of information do they need to gather there that would be helpful for the investigators?
Well, sure, and you mentioned real estate agents. I had the opportunity for the first time ever to present to 150 of them, real estate agents and brokers, last Friday at the Sacramento Convention Center. And you're right, they use unlicensed people. And I explained to them, you cannot continue to do this. And what the ramifications are to the person that's unlicensed, but also what's in store for them. If they continue to do this, we need to be able to take disciplinary action against their real estate license. And that's what's going to happen. But what you can provide to us is anything that you think looks suspicious. And one of the best forms of evidence that we need is just a business card. If you can get a business card from someone that's not properly licensed, that can be charged as a misdemeanor. If you see something that just looks odd that's going on at a house, I can think of a station wagon rolling up with paint cans on the back. It doesn't look professional, report that. If you see vehicles going down the road with with, you know, HVAC units, look like they were bought over the internet. And if you have any idea where they're at, or even if you know where the supply house is, we'll follow them from the supply house.
Why just penalize the worker that are unlicensed? How about, you know, the bosses that actually, you know, engage all these
Well,
people?
sure. Then I need to clarify something, what I said earlier, because we're not penalizing the worker. We are penalizing the person that hired that worker. That worker is entitled to certain protections, and entitled to have workers' comp, to have unemployment insurance, to have a safe work environment. We're not penalizing the worker, but we are going to penalize the person that hired them. And in some cases, the person that hired them can be the property owner.
Photographs, smartphones, people, license plates. any of that
Sure,
kind of
that's
stuff
all
helpful?
real good, yes.
My question to you, are there, I guess everything is about the bottom line. The consumer doesn't want to pay any more money than he has to. And I have encountered some situations in which the homeowner said, how much are you going to charge me to do the installation? I'm going to buy the equipment over the internet, you know. And I say, well, if you're going to do that, then you hire somebody else, of course. Because then if something goes wrong with your equipment, you're going to say, I'm responsible. I didn't provide the equipment, so therefore I'm not responsible. Are there any incentives programs like PG&E or Energy Commission that will compensate homeowners for improving their equipment? Because everybody wants to save money. And the most rules and regulations, it makes it more difficult for us to do our business.
No, it's a very good point. And Scott's attended many meetings where that issue's been discussed. Now, there's a lot of rebates that are in place when you're installing new HVAC units. SMUD, I believe, is one of them that requires proof of a permit before issuing the rebate. PG&E and some of the investor-owned utilities haven't had the same requirement. I think it's up to all of us, though, as members of this industry, to go to them and say, your position is not acceptable. You shouldn't be issuing a rebate to a homeowner that did work without getting a permit and getting it finalized. It's not acceptable. But that's why we're rolling out this campaign, and we got to get some momentum behind it, because we need to get the consumers behind it. We need them to go to their building official and say, you know what, it's important they got a permit for an HVAC change out. You don't have to look at everything else if it's not a life safety issue. We need to focus on this, and we need the utilities to step up and be part of the solution. Yes.
Yeah, I think that if we're all telling the homeowners the same thing, it's got to go a long way. Those forms that we're going to hand out to the consumers, when are those going to be available, and when can we give feedback on what the content is? Because I think that's going to be a huge help. Educating the homeowner is going to be where it's at, and making sure we're all doing the same thing and telling them the same thing. There's no way around the permit.
Well, I'm hoping that some of you here will approach Leanne and Melissa. They look a little bit bored and say, probably be happy with me after this. But to take down your name and your contact information, we're going to provide you those forms. You need to tell us whether it's working or not. But I can tell you, I've been doing some work on a house, and for me, it's getting a contractor, even if it's more, that's professional. And when they give you the contract, having it be a professional contract that I can keep, and then when I go to sell that house, I can show that to the prospective buyer. And I think that's really important, and that's a message that we have to get out, and that's going to be something that the real estate agents, it's going to resonate with them.
One of the biggest problems I see, and I see it with over the many years that I've been in the business, is a lot of times the homeowner will ask an employee, hey, can you do something for me on the side, or my mother needs this done, can you come over and do it on the side? Some of them say yeah, and some of them say no, but I've caught my guys doing that plenty of times, either whether it's plumbing or mechanical. They're out taking away work from me, and they're even doing work for builder contractors, so to speak. I don't know how they get the equipment, because you have to have a license to get the equipment, so they must go into the supply house, say I'm working for so-and-so, and I'm going to pay cash, or I'm going to pay personal check, but they're doing side jobs like snow tomorrow. It's a problem.
Well, I think that the message, though, needs to be that you're becoming their employer. And I don't know if Rick Lopes would want to perhaps modify. He has an owner builder beware flyer to include the labor code that makes it really clear that when you hire someone that's not licensed in this trade, you're their employer. And that's all you can do is tell the homeowner, you're taking a big risk when you hire this person. If you don't have workers' comp, you're not withholding taxes. What are you going to do if they get hurt? You're going to be paying their medical bills for years. Do not take the risk. It's a risk-reward issue, though. They may go ahead and still want to hire the person. All we can do is try to scare them and educate them. And at some point, maybe there could be a law to penalize them, but it's not there today other than the workers' comp issue. Okay. I've gone a little bit over, but I want to thank you for your time.